I'm Matt Weiner, and this is Fade In Original Screenplays Read by the Author, Screenplay Formatting 101. Let's get started. To read or listen to a screenplay, you have to understand the four basic elements of script writing. But before we get to them, we're going to set the stage with Fade In. Fade in doesn't necessarily mean that we're fading from black into the movie, but it's something that writers use out of tradition and to signal to the reader that the story is about to begin. So let's get to the first element of screenwriting, the scene heading or slug line. Slug line's an old newspaper term that writers have been using since the dawn of cinema. What is a scene heading or a slug line? It tells you if you're inside or outside, interior or exterior, your geographic location, and the time of day or when you are, the temporal part of the scene. Interior, Matt's basement office, day. We have inside, interior, Matt's basement office. That's where we're at. And the time of day is day. You're always going to see a scene heading in all caps, but because different writers have different styles, sometimes you'll see it in bold. Sometimes you'll see it in underline. Sometimes it'll be bold and underlined, which is how I like it because it distinguishes it visually from the rest of the page. But since we're using the defaults in Final Draft 13, we'll just go with all caps. The slug line doesn't always have to be general, though. It can be more specific and broken up, like this: Matt's house, basement office, day. What this is telling you is that we're in my house, and then more specifically, we're in my basement, and it's daytime. This is used a lot because if I'm going to be writing scene after scene after scene without leaving my house, like let's say I go to the kitchen or I go to the living room or I go to the dining room, instead of having to write the full scene heading every time, I would just have to say kitchen. The point of writing as a writer is to make the screenplay as easy to understand and easy to follow as possible. If it gets confusing, you're not doing your job. Day is a general day or night kind of thing, but you could also be more specific and say morning or afternoon or night, something like that. But technically speaking, day or night is really all you need in a screenplay to know where you're at in time. The second element of every screenplay is going to be the action block. And the action block is going to describe the location if necessary, and then just go straight into what's happening in the scene. This isn't a novel, it's a screenplay. So you're not going to get flowery prose and poetry and that kind of stuff because it's not necessary. And you definitely shouldn't be getting what the characters are thinking or feeling because you can't see that on the screen. And that violates the rule of show, don't tell for screenwriting. A small unfinished closet. On one side, storage containers and children's toys are stacked as high as possible. On the other side is a makeshift office, laptop and microphone on a desk, simple lighting clamped to the walls, a camera mounted on a tripod. Great. We know exactly what the space looks like without taking up too much real estate on the page. Once you have your scene described, you got to put somebody in it, or else nothing's happening in the story. Matt, 40s, bookish with a salt and pepper beard, pecks away at the laptop and talks to the camera. First time a character is introduced is always going to be in all caps. After that, it's just regular Matt with a capital M. When you introduce somebody, you got to describe them just a little bit, age, maybe description, race if it's necessary. Now that I'm in the scene, I got to say something, which is the third element of screenwriting, dialogue. And I am putting into this little section the character's name as well, because you're never really going to see a floating block of dialogue without knowing who's saying it. Matt, A, B, C. A always, B, B, C closing. Always be closing. Always be closing. All right, that's my Alec Baldwin impression from Glengarry Glen Ross. If you haven't seen it, check it out. Character names are always center justified, all caps. Let's see what this would look like if I add a second character. Rachel, 40s, stunning and impossibly patient, peeks her head through the door. Rachel, of course, is my wife. We have a new character here, so if you remember, all caps with a parenthetical to describe them. Rachel, the dog needs to be walked. Matt turns to the door. But I'm in the middle of my Alec Baldwin impression. No response. Now that we are past the introduction of my character, my name is just written normally with a capital M. But this takes us to the fourth and final element of a screenplay, which is the transition. Transitions take us from one scene to another scene. They could be anywhere from dissolve to as you can see on here, Final Draft gives you a list of the most commonly used transitions: cut to, fade in, fade out, fade to, dissolve to, back to, match cut to, jump cut to, fade to black, smash cut to black, time cut. Transitions are really at the discretion of the director and the editor. You should use them sparingly, but writers use them a lot. And so let's see what it would look like if I had a transition in this story. I'll use smash cut to, even though smash cut to and cut to, there's really no difference, but smash cut to sounds a lot more exciting. So we'll go with that. This time we're outside. Exterior, suburban neighborhood, moments later. I could say day, which would also be accurate, but I'm choosing to tell the reader that we haven't changed days. We're in the same day. We're actually not that far away from where we were, and so I'm doing moments later. Matt walks Bandit, rambunctious cockapoo, in the grass field of a town-home community. The dog is more interested in thrashing around with his leash than doing his business. Bandit is an animal, but still a character, so I've decided to capitalize Bandit's name and give the cockapoo a short description. Now that we're done with that scene, we're going to transition back to my basement office with another transition, dissolve to interior Matt's house, basement office later. Again, I could say day, there'd be nothing wrong with that, but I'll stick with later just so that you know that it's still the same day. Matt continues typing and talking to the camera. Since we've already described what the basement office looks like, there's no need to describe it again. We just go straight into what's happening in the scene. Whenever you go from inside to outside or you're changing locations, you need to use a full slug line. You can't use a short slug, as we'll go into in a little bit. Matt, now that you know the 4 building blocks of a script, let's add some spice to it. Matt adds some spice. What do I mean by spice? Well, there's a lot of stuff that you can see in a script that builds on these 4 elements of a screenplay. For instance, let's look at some parentheticals. 2 of the most common parentheticals that you're going to see come after a character's name, and that's for voiceover or off screen. So whenever you hear narration, Morgan Freeman in Shawshank Redemption, they're not talking in the scene, they're talking, it's voiceover. How do you see that? How do you put that into a script? Voiceover. That's how you do it. And so you can see that Final Draft gives you a bunch of defaults for the most common parentheticals after a name. You have VO for voiceover and OS for off screen. I don't really use the rest of that stuff because this is really all you need. Voiceover would tell you that I am not speaking it in camera. It's just kind of a voice in my head. A, B, C, A, always B, B, C, closing, always be closing, always be closing. How would you use off screen? Off screen. So instead of Rachel peeking her head through the door from another room, Rachel shouts, even though she's impossibly patient, the dog needs to be walked. Now it's off screen. She's not in the scene peeking her head. We can't see her, but we're telling the reader that she's still here. She's like right over there. And so it's off screen, not voiceover. The next thing you're going to see in every screenplay is a parenthetical underneath a character's name. And what that parenthetical does is tell the reader kind of like how that dialogue is intended to be read. It might convey some emotion. It does step a little bit on the toes of the actor, but here's why it's important in a screenplay. Let's say that this is what I wrote. Matt turns to the door. Matt, annoyed. But I'm in the middle of my Alec Baldwin impression, right? That's how that line would be read by a better actor than me. But what if I did this? Matt turns to the door. Matt, heartbroken. But I'm in the middle of my Alec Baldwin impression. It's the same line, but it's got a different meaning to it. It's got a different feel to it. What you might also see, though, sometimes is a little bit of action put into the parenthetical so that you don't have to have like another entire block of action and a character name, and then you start that stuff over again. And so you might have something like Matt turns to the door and takes a bite of pickle. Matt, mouthful of pickle. Well, I'm in the middle of my Alec Baldwin impression. Mouthful of pickle isn't describing anything. It's an action. But instead of me saying that I'm talking with my mouth full, I just kind of put it in there. Parentheticals can also be put in the dialogue itself to either break up long stretches of dialogue, or again to add an action beat, or to convey a change of emotion or something. So let's see how that would look here. A, B, C. A always B, B, C closing. Really gets into it. Always be closing. Always loud. Always be closing. So I have put parentheticals in this dialogue to convey pauses and emotion. Mostly I use this if I have a long block of dialogue and it just doesn't look right on the page. You don't want what's called an I page, where it's just character name and just woof, all dialogue. It's not very appealing to the eye, and it's going to turn off your reader. And a lot of the stuff that you do in writing is you try to make the page clean and easy to read and logical. Part of that is breaking up dialogue. So I'll put in beat, or I'll put in pause, something like that. I can even do, but I'm in the middle of my Baldwin impression. Breaking up the dialogue with a bit of action, that's also something you can do. Now let's talk about that whole short slug line thing. Let's say I am doing my thing here, and and I say always be closing. He stops and stares at the camera. I could really use a pickle. I smash cut from I could really use a pickle, and ordinarily you would get this done automatically by Final Draft, but since it didn't do it, I'll put it in there. Continued, that's a parenthetical that tells you that the same character is talking now that was talking before. There's been no break with another character talking. I could really use a pickle. Smash cut, kitchen. Matt takes a bite of a pickle. Back to office, basement office. Matt settles in to resume his tutorial. I don't have to do an entire slug line now. Interior, Matt's house, kitchen, day, because I already established that we're in my house. So all I have to do is kitchen for you to know where this takes place. This is why I like to change the settings to have my slugs look like this. Because when you just look at the page visually, you can see exactly when we're switching locations. One last thing that I'd like to put in here is you will see a lot of times something like this. Super Matt's Basement Office 2025. You might see super, you might see superimpose, you might see title. All of those things mean the same thing. It means we have text on the screen, and this is what it says. Sometimes you might even get a separate scene heading for the title itself, which would look something like this. Over black, saying it's a black screen. Title, Matt's Basement Office 2025. Back to scene, meaning we're back into the basement office. Or to be more specific and accurate, you could do the whole thing again. You could say day, you could say continuous. All of those things are accurate. And what it's saying to the reader is that you're going from my basement office to a black screen with the title, back to the basement office. That's pretty much it. Everything else that you might see in a screenplay that you don't understand, again, think of it logically. And whatever you think is the right answer, most likely is the right answer. But if you have questions and you want to know about something that seems weird to you, put it in the comment or email me and we can talk about it and I'll tell you about it. This is not a walkthrough on style or best practices. It's just what the formatting looks like in a screenplay. If you're interested in knowing more about style or how I write or how other writers write, let me know and maybe we can do a couple videos on that as well. But that pretty much takes us to the end of this little exercise. So we are going to fade to black to end it. And with that, I'm Matt Weiner. Thanks for tuning in. This is Fade In, original screenplays read by the author. See you next page.